everyone, this is Pico Entertainment and we're back again, and here now we have another video for you, and this will be an overall review of The Flash Season 7. Now there will be spoilers throughout this video, so just to be warned, if you haven't yet caught up with all the episodes within the Season 7, I advise you to go away, catch up with the episodes, and then come back to this overall review. Now, as with all of the CW shows going back for the last year, Season 6 was affected by the COVID outbreak, of course, resulting in a much more shortened batch of episodes than the normal 22 episodes that we have with each individual show. Now, this meant that the McCulloch Mirrorverse arc in the latter part of Season 6 had to be concluded for the first part of Season 7. And that's where we really started overall this season, with Team Flash battling Eva McCulloch, who had recently emerged from the Mirrorverse. At the same time, they also had to try and rescue Iris, who had disappeared at that Season 6 cliffhanger. Now, the second arc of this season covered the emergence of the various forces. This included Furiosa, who was a giant hulking monster. We had Psyche, who was able to influence the minds of others. We had Dean, who was encountered by both Chester and Cisco when they travelled back in time to the 90s, and Dean had the ability to create a time zone, living out the best moments within his own life. And the final force was the Speed Force, which came in the form of Barry's mother, Nora. Caitlin had some interesting developments this season, which saw her and Killer Frost separate from each other on a permanent basis, and we later on followed Killer Frost as she came into some troubles herself, finding herself pursued by Police Chief Kramer, who is obsessed with hunting down metahumans by curing them, and this development later on sees Frost imprisoned for a lifetime sentence. We also saw a potential love interest for Frost with bartender Chillblaine, who was a villainous presence overall, but over the course of this season, Frost develops a strong crush and overall relationship with him. Joe himself was working on finding the real reason behind Kramer's motivations, and through constant conflicts with her, this sees him eventually resign from the police force. Now, we also saw both Chester and Allegra become regulars of Team Flash. Allegra had to deal with reuniting and the ultimate death of her sister Esperanza, and Chester became the de facto replacement of Cisco in terms of handling all of the tech within Star Labs. Now, Season 7 was also notable of the departure of both Tom Cavanagh and Carlos Valdez, who play Wells and Cisco, and they've been there, of course, as the original characters from the beginning of the show. Now, to be honest, this departure is somewhat lessened by the fact that both actors return as their characters in the latter story of the series overall, so it wasn't really a permanent departure, and to be honest, we all knew that they would have some sort of recurring role. Now, I anticipated that they wouldn't come back to near the series finale of the show, so I was very surprised that they came back so shortly after they had departed from the show. Cecile had some small story arcs which involved her trying to control her mental abilities, and we saw a brief appearance from John Diggle, who we all know from the Arrow television series, and he himself was struggling with some mental capacity as well. And to be honest, we've seen him make further appearances within the CW shows, and this is hinted very much as to whether he will become the next Green Lantern. At some point, they really have to press the button on that and decide whether they're going to actually push through and have him be the Green Lantern or not. And I suppose that's a debate for a future element of the CW verse as a whole. Now, the final arc of this season concluded with the Godspeed War, where 6 drones of the Speedster emerged looking for the original version, August Hart. Now, this story saw the return of Barry's daughter, Nora, from 2009, and Nora from 2049, along with Barry's future son, Bart Allen, who was also known as Impulse. Now, after a much improved Season 6, I have to say that I felt very indifferent to the season overall. It really has been a mixed bag of sorts. Now, I credit the showrunners to an extent, because there have been some attempts at big ideas and big concepts, and they've sensibly committed to segment the series in smaller mini arcs as opposed to one single villain dominating the season. Now, we've seen, to the show's detriment, particularly in Season 4 and Season 5, when we had the likes of The Thinker, how much that really took apart the show, and to be honest, it was very much of a struggle sustaining your interest in terms of those particular seasons. So since Season 6, they've gone for this much more truncated approach to the storytelling, and I think that's benefited it to a lot. Now, the story arcs themselves for season 7 just haven't been as compelling or exciting to watch. Most antagonists have been really weak. When we look in particularly the Mirrorverse arc and the Speed Forces arc, they ended so flatly. Normally we have a big epic scale battle, and we had that in the penultimate episodes, but the way that these arcs ended, where basically Barry or Iris just had a very touchy heart-to-heart with the villains, and that was enough to get them to stop what they were doing overall, and that never really rung true, because they've spent these multiple episodes building up their desired motivations, whether it be seeking revenge or they get corrupted by their own power. So we're ramping up the threat levels, and then just to have them dissipate after just a small conversation, it really undercut a lot of the credibility and threat levels within the antagonist throughout this particular season. Another big issue that many have had is the overall focus on the supporting characters, which at times has left Barry sidelined and very much more of a periphery character. Many episodes had Team Flash operating without the Flash himself. Now, with the CW shows where you normally get around 15 to 20 episodes, it is to be expected that the lead character can't be in every single episode. So we understand that you will have certain amounts of story arcs where the supporting characters are the spotlight, and that's to be expected, and to be honest, that can benefit a show a lot. That can add a lot of weight and depth and layers in terms of the overall story arc if you don't just have it primarily centered around the main lead character. For example, we had Smallville, whereas Clark was obviously the lead character, but you had multiple episodes where we focus on Lionel and Lex, or Lana, or Lois, or Chloe, or Jonathan and Martha Kent as well, and that added value. But you have to remember that Clark was always a prominent character in the majority of the episodes, but that hasn't been the case with the Flash, and sadly it only works well if you have really strong supporting characters, and for me the supporting characters just aren't very strong enough. So when we get episodes or arcs focus on those characters, it really makes the show weaker as a whole. And I had to in particularly look at both Chester and Allegra, and they're just not as interesting characters. Chester, okay, he is essentially the Cisco replacement, as I mentioned before, so his role is justified because you need him there to build all the tech and oversee all of the surveillance in terms of the heroes, fair enough. But Allegra, sadly, as the character, just doesn't feel necessary to me. She did have a story arc before where she was primarily working with Iris when Iris was much more of a journalist again, and we've had this story involving her sister Esperanza, but apart from that, she just doesn't feel that important to the show. It's nothing to do with the actress, no faults in terms of her overall performance, but we did have multiple episodes where the likes of Allegra as well came back, and Sue as well. There was the episode where Sue came back, and it was much more focused on her and Allegra and Esperanza, and episodes like this, you kept thinking, what was the point of it? It had no bearing overall in terms of the season's main story arc, so why did we get it? Now, of course, you're going to get standalone episodes, but when you look at the season as a whole, and in particularly the finale episode, where I felt there were certain developments that were thrown in at the last minute and could have had more development. This is why, because we had too many filler episodes, standalone episodes surrounding and supporting characters, and instead of developing more of the more substantial arcs of the season, which would have meant that the finale would have been far more powerful and impactful than what it actually was. When we look at the finale itself, the concluding part of the Godspeed War, you know, those last minute developments that I talked about, we included the likes of Thorne returning at the end to fight with Barry against Godspeed. We had Kramer's revelation that she was a metahuman, and then Nora coming in the last moments to help out with the battle against Godspeed. All of these developments really should have been handled earlier on within the season, and then they would have carried a lot more weight towards the end finale. So this is when the show has really got to start prioritizing who are the important characters within the show. Now, I've mentioned in previous reviews that one of the big issues of the series as a whole is that there were too many members of Team Flash. Not only that, there were too many members that had superpowers, so this really took away the primary role of Barry, and he had multiple episodes where Team Flash could essentially defeat the villains without Barry being involved at all, and that's not what it should be when we are talking about the Flash as a lead character. So what I hope we don't see in the future is the likes of Chester getting superpowers as well. You've trimmed it down to a point, you've eliminated now Harrison Wells and Cisco. So hopefully that will mean that we can get a much more streamlined approach to this series. Nothing wrong with Chester and Allegra having standalone episodes, but make it so it's around the other supporting characters. So don't just have this is Chester's episode on his own. Have it where Iris is more involved with it, Allegra is more involved, Caitlin is more involved, or Killer Frost is more involved. So give it a much more of a unilateral, unified front where 2, 3, 4 characters can be involved in the main story arcs overall, and that can build much more in terms of the overall story arcs within the season. So again, another major point of improvement has to be the villains, as I mentioned before. So hopefully when we go into season 8 we can see far more developed villains. Again, by all means, if you want to do the mini story arcs as what I've mentioned before, fair enough, but give us just much more substantial villains that aren't defeated on a whim straight away. This was sadly very much so in the Godspeed arc, where basically Thorn defeats Godspeed very easily. So after all that build up, it just took Thorn to just arrive and beat Godspeed very easily. So very anticlimactic after all that build up and focus on the Godspeed War. And this is something that happened too many times throughout the series, so they really need to work a bit more in terms of the overall villains throughout this show. Now we talk about Iris again and her role, and yes, it did feel again that this was very much of a diminished participation for her. Season 6 actually improved on this because it made Iris go back to her journalistic roots, and she was very much of a pivotal character in terms of the whole Mirrorverse arc especially, but this really saw Iris fade away once again. We started off with her kind of getting to grips with her experiences within the Mirrorverse arc, but then she kind of disappears. She doesn't really have too much of an impact going forward, and then we even had that small development where she disappeared for a short while. She went ahead in the zone, or the Force zone, that Dion was participating in, and she didn't come back for about 3 or 4 episodes. This was surrounding the story where Barry was wondering whether Iris was pregnant, and we had those scenes where he was trying to call her as well, and then all of a sudden she just appears out of nowhere saying that she's just been hiding out with Dion in a certain Force zone. So again, they still have to get to grips and try and find a more defined purpose for Iris. So if I had to give an overall score for season 7 of The Flash, I would give it a 6.3 out of 10. Yes, there were some big ideas, as I mentioned before, and in terms, I think the effects work and action were overall quite satisfactory and quite good, especially when we look at the Godspeed War, when we saw Team Flash coming up against the likes of the Godspeed drones. We had some very good effect sequences which were done very well and very well executed as well, so that's a plus point. So I think they should maintain that standard going ahead for season 8. But as I mentioned before, they need to just work better in terms of the storylines and the development of the characters, and make sure the participation of the Team Flash works much more in unison. So we will wait and see what happens for season 8. Many people have debated whether season 8 should be the last. I really can't see them getting to season 10. I think that would be stretching it too far. I don't think there's enough creative mileage to get to a season 10, but we all know that's what the CW likes to do. I'm pretty sure if Arrow continued, they would have reached a season 10. I'm pretty sure if Melissa Benoist stayed with Supergirl, that would have carried on for season 7 and 8. We've seen Legends of Tomorrow, amazingly for some reason, get to a season 7. So I'm pretty sure they'll try to get to a season 10, but I think that'll be a massive mistake. And to be honest, if season 8 turns out to be the last season of The Flash, I think that would have been a suitable choice and maybe the right decision overall. But who knows, maybe season 8 they can maybe find some reinvigoration with some more interesting story arcs, interesting characters and villains, and if so, maybe that can renew a lot of enthusiasm of viewers going ahead for season 8 overall. So those are my overall thoughts and season review of season 7 of The Flash. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Did you think it was an improvement or not from the previous season overall? Where do you think it stands in the overall ranking of the particular seasons of the show? How do you think The Flash overall compares to the likes of the other CW-verse shows in terms of Superman and Lois, Supergirl as well, and of course we've got Stargirl coming out later on within August, and Legends of Tomorrow. So let me know what you think in terms of it on a comparative basis. Please also subscription and notification buttons so I can provide you with more high quality content like this in the future. But that's it for now. Take care of yourselves, stay at safe distances, and I will see you very, very soon.